Hey everybody, today is Monday, August 15th, 2022. Coming up on the show today, from Bullet Train, editor Elísabet Ronaldsdóttir.
Cut it without the music, get that internal rhythm going, and then I can promise you it's like 99% chance any music you choose is going to fit to it, if it has its internal rhythm right. They've actually kind of shot it before and they edit it and put music to it. It's like a whole production making stunt this. That doesn't mean that we will always follow it. For me, it's about a singular vision. Editing is a singular vision. I know of a movie that had, 12 editors? It didn't make it a better movie.
Yes, all that and even more on this edition of The Rough Cut. Oh boy, podcast time. My favorite time. I hope it's yours too. All right, favorite might be a stretch for you, not for me. But hopefully this podcast is something you look forward to each week. Anyway, welcome to part 2 of our 2-part series on assistant editor Matt Absher. What's that, you say? You thought we were talking about Bullet Train today? And you don't even remember there being a part 1 of this so-called 2-part series on assistant editor Matt Absher? Well, slow down. We are talking about Bullet Train. And we are talking with Bullet Train editor Elísabet Ronaldsdóttir, acclaimed action editor Elísabet Ronaldsdóttir. But in our talk with her, she gives a shout out to her longtime assistant, the aforementioned Matt Absher. And when she did, I thought, man, that name sounds familiar. I think I've heard it recently. And I was right, which doesn't happen often. But if you go back a couple of weeks to our interview with Nope editor Nick Mansour, you will hear him talk about his assistant, Matt Absher. Yes, this is all a big coincidence, but you know I'm all about promoting assistant editors and talking about how assistants can move up to being editors. So I thought that was a fun fact. You go, Matt Absher. Now then, Elísabet. We last spoke with her, I think, almost a year ago when we covered Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and she joined us that day with editors Nat Sanders and Harry Yoon. So go back and give that one a listen if you haven't heard it yet. That film was directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, and it was the first time Elísabet had worked with him. But she is quite familiar with Bullet Train director David Leitch. They first teamed up for John Wick and then went on to do Atomic Blonde as well as Deadpool 2. And to the delight of action comedy fans everywhere, they are back together again for Bullet Train. And Elísabet will tell us all about her work on David's new movie, what their working process is like, her approach to cutting action, all that stuff. But first, a quick tip of the cap to our friends and sponsor, Extreme Music. Just like Elísabet is a big name in action movie editing, Extreme Music is a big name, dare I say the biggest name, in production audio. What is production audio? Well, it's audio for your production, my friend. Great music that can make your next film or TV show that much greater. They have an immense catalog of tracks created by many of the most celebrated names in the world of music, producing, and composing. It's all very easy to do. All you have to do is search on keywords like tempo, genre, lyrics, stuff like that. You can even give them a track for reference so they can find you more just like it. On top of that, you can get all those tracks in different lengths. Maybe you just need 30 seconds, not 2 minutes. You can also customize the instrumentation because maybe not everybody is a fan of the French horn. Who knows? But you will be a fan of Extreme Music and how easy they make it to license the best production audio. So the next time you've got a story to tell, make sure to visit extrememusic.com. Now then, all aboard for the Shinkansen Express from Tokyo to Kyoto. It is time to talk to today's guest, Bullet Train editor Elísabet Ronaldsdóttir.
Film industry here in Iceland, and it's a privilege being a part of that as well. And I do get to work on smaller independent movies here, which I think grounds me in the most amazing, effective way.
It's funny, when we spoke last time, obviously we had 3 editors, which was great. But as always happens, you're like, oh, I wish I had a little more time with each editor to follow up on specific things about their career and their approach. And so I'm sure today, during the course of our talk, I'm going to say, you know, ER, last time we spoke, you said this. I'd like to follow up on that.
That's all good.
The first thing we should probably talk about with Bullet Train, though, is that the train kind of left the station without you. You were still busy on Shang-Chi while Bullet Train was in production. I think it was from fall of 2021 until earlier this year.
Yeah, during principal shooting, I wasn't there, and I'm so grateful that they choose to wait for me. And Evan Schiff was amazing and held the fort while I was away. And I'm very grateful for him. He did a great job. And then I just came back. I came from now I get confused. What movie was it? No. I came from Shang-Chi. My first assistant, Matt Absher, stayed on Shang-Chi because we didn't both want to leave it at the same time. So I actually got Evan's second assistant, who became my first assistant, Nick Ellsberg. Amazing assistant. He just pulled us through COVID, like with setups, and he was amazing. And it was right in the beginning of February 21. And I just had to dive in and like look at all the dailies, like catch up. But I'm very grateful they waited for me, because it can be very difficult to work with someone else's edit. I feel I know right away if something works in a take. But I also have to be a bit judgmental because you want to make it as good as possible. I always think about it as carving. You have to do it in layers. You carve one layer again and again. And this has to do with building the characters. This was a huge ensemble of very strong, great actors, great characters. And it was a huge balancing act. Like, when would we introduce them? How would they shine without shadowing any of the other characters? My first idea was really rearrange the whole opening as well, because it was shot as chapters, as the book is. There were chapters, and each character is introduced separately without them connecting. That happens like further down the road in the movie, like half an hour into the movie. And I just felt it didn't really feel like a David Leitch movie. And also in the process of experimenting with the whole opening, like trying to figure out like how do they meet, how do we intertwine them, it just felt more of a fate thing, taking the chapters away. And I talk about this a lot. It's not because the book is wrong. It's not because the script is wrong. It's only because movie is a language on its own. And as with any translations between languages, sometimes you have to rearrange words and sentences to tell the same story. So that was a huge balancing act, but it was so much fun. And let's face it, just watching the dailies of Bullet Train is hilarious. You laugh through the whole thing.
Well, since you brought up the fact that Bullet Train was adapted from a book, I should ask you if to be familiar with the project in any way ahead of time. Did you read the book?
I read it, yeah. Also just because you're curious, like, And yeah, I was curious. So I read the book. I read a lot of renditions of the script when it was in development. And I just get my hands on everything, like stunt-vis, pre-vis, you have storyboards. You have to use everything you possibly can to get into the mindset of the director. Where is he going? What does he want? What is the story he's telling? How does he want to tell it? The more I read on it, the more I talk about it with the director, the more helpful I'm going to be as an editor.
The film follows several assassins aboard a high-speed train going from Tokyo to Kyoto, I believe. Each of them are on a different mission, but ultimately they're interconnected. So you have these multiple parallel storylines that bump into each other every once in a while until everything just sort of converges down to the climax at the end, which is what you would expect. Having these multiple storylines and making them fit together better. What were the challenges you faced there?
It was shot so beautifully and the script was amazing. Obviously, the book is amazing. So we didn't have problems. We just played around with where would we introduce certain characters and where would his backstory come. Every single scene went through several iterations of what it could be. And I think we landed with something that works and that we are very proud of and happy with. But I think it's so important in all storytelling not to allow the audience to be ahead of you. You want them to follow the story, but you don't want them to have too much information going ahead. So we worked a lot with that in this movie. So there weren't many scenes cut out. There were a couple in the beginning exactly because we don't want the audience to know certain things when we get on the train, because it kind of ruins the surprise going on. But most of the scenes shot are in the movie, which is actually amazing. Some of them in a very tight, short form, but they're more or less all there. There were concerns. We had to go and be extremely critical about what takes we used, mainly because it was a very fine line to thread when we became very claustrophobic. So we had to open up. And if you watch the movie, there are not many, it happens, but there are not many close-ups because it's a claustrophobic train. So you have to try to breathe around the character at least a tiny bit. It was actually quite thrilling because there were obviously so many ways to go. And then we just had to make a decision. And I think we made some really good decisions.
In discussions with editors, a lot of times we'll talk about what it's like working with a director who is also the writer. Sometimes the director is also an actor, the star of the film. Here, the director is a veteran stunt coordinator. Does he bring more detail in the action element of the film than you might get from another director?
Oh, he does that already during the principal shooting, during the choreography, that's like his thread all the way through. So make no mistake, he is the king of action in my mind. That said, he's also extremely thoughtful storyteller. Just such a joy to work with because he has great knowledge of film history. He's fearless. He's so willing to experiment and try out different things and have fun with the material. It often happens that directors and producers are a bit more scared about it, but he's just like, he welcomes it, which makes it such a joy to work with him. He takes good care of his characters. Most of our discussions are about characters. And then I've just worked with him for a very long time. It's been 9 years, so we also have a shorthand. I know what he's going to ask me about before he asks, And he plans and thinks, and I just love to see how he works and thinks and executes those amazing films he directs.
Well, how has your relationship with him evolved over those 9 years? I think it's 4 films now. How have the two of you grown together in that regard? How has your process evolved?
We hit it off right away. We've been good working together from the get-go. How has our process evolved? It's kind of the same. It's a lot of talking, sometimes walking and talking, but a lot of talking. And his wife, main producer on all his movies, Kelly McCormick. So we're a bit of a trio in post. I even actually moved in with them this time because of COVID. So we just lived together, editing movies during the day and making popcorn and watching movies at night. And they as a team is something else. They are so great as a team, producer-director team. And we just have extremely lively, fun, experimental discussions about the movie we are working on. Because it's kind of a team that works on David's movies. They all know each other. Everyone has been there before, kind of a thing. I think what has happened the past 9 years is also a trust. And we embrace it. It's amazing.
In action in general, does the script typically offer you any direction when it comes to cutting action? Or is it mostly just, and pardon the pun, bullets of then they do this, then they do this, then they do this?
Yeah, absolutely. But they do very often make stunt previews where they basically shoot the sequence, even though it changes maybe a bit once you shoot it for real. They've actually kind of shot it before and they edit it and put music to it. It's like a whole production making stunt pieces. That doesn't mean that we will always follow it and never to the T because we're obviously working with different takes, but we get the idea. The idea is very clear.
We're always talking about ways for young editors to get into the business and rise up through the ranks and different roles that they can fulfill to ultimately become an editor. Stunt viz editor, do you see that as a pathway into editorial?
I'm not. It's usually the stuntmen themselves who do this. But if I was a young young editor wanting to be up and coming and wanted to do action, I would just seek them out and offer my services.
So for David, does he give you, in general, a lot of coverage? Does he allow for a lot of alternate takes, even any improv? Because this is a very funny movie.
So yes and no. I mean, again, it just varies. What is being shot? What is the setup? What is the time they had to shoot it, etc., etc. There are so many things that will affect how much material I'll get. One of the hardest, again, it was just so much fun, but they, especially Lemon and Tangerine in the movie, those characters, they ad-libbed through the whole movie. It was hilarious. And it's actually kind of sad that people will miss a lot of jokes they'll never see because they didn't make it to the movie, because then the movie would have been like 5 hours or something. We had so much to work with. They shot 200 hours, I think it was, with a 2-camera setup, but it's still 100 hours. And we end up with, it's actually 2 hours. It's 120. It's 119, 90, the movies. It's like almost 2 hours. So it was just so many decisions to make. Like, are we going with this joke? And we tested this movie, I think 5 times altogether. But that was mainly to test jokes. Is this one funnier? Is this getting a bigger laugh? Which is very common now with comedies, that we test the jokes, record the audience, and then you watch them react to the movie. Are they laughing? Are they smiling? You know, are they looking at their phones? So we have this tool. We can test it. So why wouldn't we? It's kind of a different world, especially for me that started editing a long, long time ago and in Europe. It's a very different reality in the sense that you have so many tools to assist you make difficult choices. When people are ad-libbing throughout the movie, you can have so many choices and they could all work. So what are we going to do? We have this one. It works. We have this one and this joke, all in the same scene. Like, we can't have all 3 of them. So which one are we going to pick? I might have my favorite and David might have his favorite. And then we just go, let's test it. Let's test all 3 of them and just see which one is the biggest hit. And then if they're all just making the same laughter happening, then it's up to us. We just have to choose. But with David, he knows what he's doing when it comes to action. It's never a problem.
Well, you know what you're doing when it comes to action, too.
Yes, thankfully I do. But that's also, after 9 years with David, something would be wrong if I wouldn't have learned a trick or 2.
Your name has sort of become synonymous with action movie editing. If you were to teach a class on cutting action, what would be the first thing you'd teach your students?
To have fun with it. It's just so amazing. And it's such a privilege to work in movies. It's such a great privilege. And I think we just have to be unafraid to experiment and have fun with it. For me, it's a dance. It's the alpha dance, right? So everything is choreographed. Hopefully, you have trained actors or stuntmen doing the action. The camera is in the right position. It's going to look great. Just have fun with it. You've got the stunt whiz. You know how this is choreographed. You know what's happening. Everything is down. You've got your scene together with the new material that has been shot. And then I just watch it again and again and again, as you would do any dance video you cut. You just watch it and you try to get that internal rhythm going. Because then you can put music on it, but everything is going to look good with music because music is such a powerful medium. So cut it without the music, get that internal rhythm going. And then I can promise you, it's like 99% chance any music you choose is going to fit to it if it has its internal rhythm right.
The internal rhythm and the tempo, the way you cut these things, probably 95% of what you do to make an action sequence work is all just cutting by instinct. Within those cuts, are there interframe things that you'll do and tools that you'll use to make a cut work better?
Yeah, it happens. Absolutely. But it happens if you feel like something isn't punchy enough, like not hitting hard enough. Yes, you use a lot of those tricks. Frames out, variable speed, all this stuff.
When you're doing action, let's say you're doing a car chase, It would seem that you have some liberty as an editor. You have some freedom that you can sort of jump things a little bit physically without jarring the audience. You have all this hand-to-hand combat taking place on a train, these very tight train cars, and that can be kind of, if you're not careful, it can be confusing for the audience.
All that credit goes obviously to the people that shot this, but they did that amazingly. And David Schoenemann, the production designer, just this brilliant, every car has its own, like you have the Momomon car, you have the quiet car, you have the VIP car, and you have the bathrooms. So I never had problem knowing what car I was in per se. And I think that is a credit to the production designer, director, and cinematographer, Jonathan Sella. But obviously, we did play with, people might not know this. I think they had like 2 cars, and then they just had to reset them and numbers and stuff. And we were trying to keep track on especially when we started moving things around, like is he in car 1, 2, is he going to 3? So we had to track all of that and make sure it worked.
Do you have any techniques that you use to track that kind of stuff?
I just trusted my little brain, trying to figure it out. But I had such a great team. I mentioned Nick Ellsberg, and there were Caroline Calvert was with us as well. And again, this is during COVID. It was not only shot during COVID, it was also posted all the way to spring 22. We were working on it, obviously for reasons that were out of our control, like COVID, where visual effects were more difficult because they go all over the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So everything kind of went a bit slower in the receiving department, receiving stuff, because people had COVID. People were isolating because of COVID, couldn't travel between countries because of COVID. Just getting aerial shots from Japan was took us so many months. So, for additional photography. But that team with Nick at the helm just did such an amazing job, keeping us running and working together. And it was actually quite amazing. I obviously spoke with my first Nick a lot, as we are doing now through a computer. I think I met him the first time I met him was at the first studio screening. It was it was so crazy.
Going back to how you connected to all these characters, you do these title treatments. When we meet a new character, or even if we've met them already, you'll put the title up with their name, translated into Japanese as well. How did you come to that model of title treatments and that way of introducing characters?
So this is typical David. He loves graphic. He loves on-screen graphic. He loves a lot happening in the frame. So we got in contact with David Mitchin at Picture Mill, and the 2 Davids went to town. Obviously, you can have meanings and notes and stuff, but they are the ones that did most of the work with the titles, the design of them. And that was, again, another thing. We went through so many iterations, both different designs of those titles, but also a lot more. We started out with probably 5 times more titles all over the place. And then just dialing down, it just became a bit too much.
It's a fantastic cast in the film. Obviously, you have some pretty big star power there when Brad Pitt's the lead. You also have another very big star that you don't really see until the very end, but you certainly hear her. And that is Sandra Bullock, who plays Brad Pitt's dispatcher or boss.
Yeah, I mean, Sandra obviously is a huge star, but she's actually just a cameo in this movie. But she was just a very well-known cameo because it was out there from day one. So of her just turning up on set. So it was a bit tricky because we didn't really have much material with her. You never see her fighting or doing anything. There just wasn't room to do that stuff. So we were left with the idea, are we going to have her just sitting there talking on the phone through the whole movie? But if you don't see her, she actually has more to do. You know what I mean? She's not. So we kind of just late in the process decided to take her out. Also, testing. It just turned out that when people saw her in the beginning, they got disappointed of how little she's in the movie. And when they didn't see her in the movie, they were just happy seeing her at the end.
So when we talked about Shang-Chi, you had said that you were a little wary of going into that project because it involved multiple editors, and sometimes that can be challenging for you in your process. And then you met Nat Sanders, and then Harry Yoon came on.
I love Nat. Love both of them.
Yes, and you, as you said, it just clicked, and it was great.
They're so amazing.
And now you're back to being a solo act again. How does it compare working alone with working as part of a team?
Well, working with team, it's the humans. I just like on Shang-Chi, Nat Sanders and Harry, I mean, just beautiful human beings, and beautiful human beings will always teach you something, which is healthy and good. And they're also both great editors. But for me, it's about a singular vision. Editing is a singular vision. And that's not given that that's going to happen. Yeah, we've all seen movies with, some of them. I know of a movie that had, 12 editors? It didn't make it a better movie. That's not how this happens. You need a singular vision. For me, I need a singular vision because it's obviously the provocative,
Prerogative?
I can't even say it. You say it again, one more time.
Was it provocative or prerogative?
Prerogative. My Icelandic muscles just don't handle this word. So, but for the studios or the directors or anyone who wants to work with multiple editors, and there are a lot of editors that really like that setup. That's all good. It's just for me, it's such a singular vision. And also maybe I'm just a control freak. I just need to know what's happening in this scene and there, and then this could happen. And if I don't have control what's happening over there, how am I gonna, So maybe it's my shortcomings, and I just have to embrace them.
There are some new things that came along with this remote working that are a benefit, and then there are some negatives. Certainly the human aspect of it and the interpersonal relationships you say you really rely upon. Under normal circumstances, would you prefer to edit on site in an action film where you're actually able to see how that scene came together, or do you like to be removed from that process and really just discover everything in the editing room?
I kind of like both. But the reason I want to be close to set, I don't need to be on the set. The reason I want to be close to set is because I'm close to my director. And that, for me, is extremely important. If something comes up, or even if it's just to sit down and talk through some of the scenes, like David does that a lot. Even if it's a weekend, we'll meet up and just go through everything that was shot, or, not maybe everything, but like certain things, we talk about them, possible problems, etc. And for me, as an editor, that's extremely valuable.
So since you two collaborate so well together and so early on in the process in general, what kind of notes do you give to him from the scripts? What are you looking for to say to him, well, David, let's be careful about this because this could be challenging in editorial, or let's make sure that we're focused on how we approach this aspect of it?
Yeah, I might ask for something like silly, but I wouldn't give him notes on action. I don't think that would happen. But we would maybe sit down and talk about okay, we just realized when we edited this scene and then it goes, we kind of feel like we need a bridge. We might say that. Or just if I had that close-up, if I just had a close-up of him, whatever, And then we can talk about it. And if David believes in it, he will find a way.
So I think I know what you mean when you say we need a bridge, but I'd love to hear you explain that a little more. When you say we need a bridge here, what does that mean?
Well, sometimes you either need just time to pass, or maybe an emotional bridge in the sense that just something that gives you time going from A to B. So it might be time passing, it might be something more emotional, maybe someone sitting in the dark, looking over the sea, something that just bridges so we can go into the other story.
A lot of times the advice an editor will give for up-and-comers is this business is all about performance. You should take a class in acting. You should take a class in screenwriting. You have used the term choreography a few times, and I believe you have a background in dance yourself. If you want to work in action, is it not a bad idea to maybe take some dance classes?
Well, I think it's important. I think, for example, ballet is important for everyone. You need to stretch. yes, I think dance is a good thing for the body, but it will not make you a stunt person because there are other things involved in stunt than just the choreography. As a dancer, you wouldn't throw yourself off a rooftop or jump off a car or crash a car, which are more of those dangerous stunts they do.
Well, who knows? Ballet might play to a wider audience if it actually did have car crashes and people jumping off roofs. You never know.
You never know. Exactly. Maybe I just discovered a new genre.
Is there another genre that you haven't done yet or another type of project you haven't done yet that you'd like to?
Oh, yeah. Horror movies. I'm sorry. I think it could be such a fun ride to edit a horror movie, but also maybe just because I know my teenagers would like me more. They're all into horror movies, so maybe I would score with them as well. But I think it's such a fascinating genre, horror movies.
I'd love to see what you bring to the table in a horror movie, ER.
I don't know if I ever get the chance, but I might jump at it if it happens. Yeah.
You know, obviously you had a lot of fun working on this film and you have a lot of fun working with David. Was there a scene that you consider your favorite or that you had the most fun working on?
Oh, there were certain scenes I enjoyed. One of them is the introduction of the wolf. I think it was just such a fun thing to find that balance with that scene and just be a part of this amazing montage. But everything with Brad, there's a reason Brad Pitt is a superstar. You just know why when you see his dailies. He's so good. So that was always a joy. And then Prince is one of my favorite characters, Joey King. I had a lot of fun with her. Also just trying to balance how evil is he, how crazy is he, how flirty is he, just finding that balance with that character was great fun.
When we were talking about Shang-Chi, I was kind of teasing you about that it wasn't your first Marvel movie, that you had actually done a Thor movie back in Iceland, an animated film. And you said, oh, that's true. And, that's the great thing about this job is that each project generally gives you new tools, whether it's doing animation. You also cited documentaries as being very valuable. I know that you've worked with David for a while and that you do have a process that's pretty well hammered out, but did you pick up any new tools, any new techniques, anything new that you are carrying away with you from working on Bullet Train?
Well, one of them is just, we can all work from home. This was unknown before COVID. No one had guessed that you could just bring Brad Pitt on a hard drive to Iceland just to work from home for a while. And again, I really had to pick up on even though I had amazing assistants when I was traveling, like in Iceland, editing Bullet Train, which I did for a while, I had to pick up on my technical wizardry. What do you say? Wizardry.
Technical wizardry?
Yeah. So that was a bit going out of my comfort zone, I have to say. But again, every ride with David Leitch and Kelly McCormick is adventurous. And you learn a lot because they allow you to experiment and do crazy stuff. Maybe in the end, they go, nah, we're not going to do that. But they still allow you to do it, which is just such a treasure. Because nothing new is ever going to happen if we're not allowed to experiment. So for me, that's just such a treat every time.
Going from one super big movie like Shang-Chi and then right into Bullet Train, already in progress, seems like it could be pretty exhausting. Under different circumstances, do you try and work in as much of a break as you can just for mental health, physical health between these projects? Or do you look at it like, well, editing is my job and there's nothing unusual about going into work every day?
Yeah, it's kind of that. And also, let's face it, I'm a workaholic. I should be working on that, but I am a workaholic. So I don't mind the work, but I do want to have, nights and weekends off, if you know what I mean. Because I think it's extremely important that we all have a life. Because I have a big family. I have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. And so we try to meet up on a regular basis. It was just very difficult during COVID. It was kind of tedious. Once we could all gather together for a short time because everyone was just all over the place and borders closed, etc. So I try to have good evenings, good weekends, and then we always take a huge Christmas break because usually movies aren't happening over Christmas. So,
well, whether being a workaholic is a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I can say that your work definitely impacts people because you're one of those editors that I get people asking me about, saying, when are you going to talk to her? I can't wait.
oh my gosh, I hope I'm not going to disappoint.
No, I don't think you're going to disappoint anybody. I think you gave me a lot of great answers and a lot of great insight. And, unless you wanted to talk about Icelandic cinema over the years, I think we covered it all.
You want to listen to me talk about Icelandic cinema through the years?
Yes, please join us again next week as Elizabeth leads us on an exploration of Icelandic cinema arts and artists. If they are all as good as her, that is an episode you won't want to miss. I am certainly glad we did not miss this opportunity to talk with her about Bullet Train. She is a force to be reckoned with in the editing room, and I always learn a lot from her. I hope you did too. A big thank you to her for breaking from her workaholic tradition to talk with us today. If you're going to be a workaholic editor, you better love the editing system you use to fulfill your editorial obsession. So start your love affair today with Avid Media Composer. It will be there for you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, and it won't judge you when you work on your friend's wedding video between gigs. What other NLE can give you that? I don't know. But I do know you should get caught up on all the latest over on the Media Composer page at avid.com, so click that little link in the show notes. Hey, as long as you're clicking things, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. And make sure your friends are subscribed to the podcast. And while you're at it, make some more friends so you can get them subscribed to the podcast. If for no better reason than we can all use some more friends. Until we meet again, this is your friend, Matt Fury, thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.